Hello, my parasocial friends. Quick question. Do you think Path of Exile is casual friendly? Well, I don't know what you might think, but I'm convinced that it is a million times more casual friendly than it was back when it was first released in 2013. There's a lot more crafting options and a lot more mechanics than there were back then. Anyway, I'm asking myself this question not because there's probably hundreds of videos on this topic, but because frankly, I created my account in 2013 and now, 10 years later, I have played for since it was moved to Steam, for a little bit under 700 hours total. That's basically an entire month of playtime non-stop. And yet, I still have not defeated the pinnacle bosses, not to mention their hard mode versions. As well as, I haven't been able to finish every challenge a league has to offer in order to unlock some cool cosmetic items. I didn't even hit level 100 once, but that's mostly because of a mechanic I find particularly annoying, and that is losing experience on death. It's the most discouraging thing for me each league, because even though I'm a filthy casual in some people's eyes, I'm stubborn, so when I see that 6 essence rare mob, I sure as hell am not strong enough to defeat. Without dying, I still try and die 4 or 5 times, essentially deleting previous 2 hours of progress. Sure, I would consider myself a filthy casual, but in my heart, I love video games. It's my favorite thing to do in the world. Usually, when I played Path of Exile, I followed a guide or a YouTube video, and the furthest I've gotten was with Pox's Righteous Fire build, where I defeated the Eater of Worlds and Cyric Exarch for the first time. Anyway, I'm digressing. I want to propose a challenge where I play as an absolute casual player would, essentially playing a blind run. No guides, no in-depth research, no external software, with some exceptions. Only use resources which are presented to you in the game, as well as some simple Google searches, because even though my knowledge of the game is not zero, I still cannot recall off the top of my head what each passive skill on the skill tree does exactly. And as you will see, we will have to plan ahead. That's pretty obvious. As an engineer, I like to look at stuff from the perspective of the designer and act according to that design. For example, when I look at the passive tree in Path of Exile, I can clearly see that some classes were designed to be played in certain ways, and I find that very elegant. And I'm not saying that some people haven't found ways to completely break the game playing builds that the designer might have not thought of. The other reason is that I would like for this series to be some sort of a guide for casual players in the form of something entertaining, but please keep in mind, I will strongly emphasize when I'm uncertain about some pieces of information. That's because I will be talking about things from my perspective and stuff I learned from my own observations and experiences, sometimes with and sometimes without any additional research. And I will talk about what I believe some mechanics do and why they were designed to do what they do. Not everything will be wrong, not everything will be right, and not everything will be complete. But even in spite all of this, I will try to present this as simple as possible, and I hope that you viewers can give feedback and input your own observations as well. So, without further ado, welcome to Path of Casual. Even casual players have some time to research on YouTube, but in my opinion, most of the guides for Path of Exile are either extremely in-depth or they assume that the player has at least some idea of what they're doing, which most of the time isn't the case. In my case, at least, it isn't. I can already see the YouTube comment, well, you're just bad. Well, yes, I admit, Path of Exile in its endgame can be extremely challenging. The biggest obstacle I encounter in my playthroughs is that I hit a wall mostly because of my gear, since when I'm following a detailed guide for the passive tree, but it doesn't mention how to gear up between early and late game and what are the strengths and weaknesses I need to look out for, then I kind of get lost, you know? In PoE, the game seems to be designed in a way that the campaign is only there to introduce you to new league mechanics as well as reward you with bonus passive abilities. Quick life hack, if you type in passives in chat, you can see if you're missing any. You should have 24 passive bonus skills at the end of the campaign, or 22 if you helped out one of the bandits in Act 2. I strongly believe that the actual game in action RPGs begins in their endgame, with the max level being 100. I think PoE actually has an excellently designed early game. It slowly ramps you up to your desired build and basically gets you ready for the end game, depending on how quickly you rush through the acts. Usually you will end up the story at 60 or 70, and it takes about 10 to 12 hours for me. I don't know if it's slow or not. I invite you to judge me in the comments down below. While you're down there, click the red button with the word subscribe on it. Moving on. My idea for a goal is simple. You have a clearly defined goal each league, which is the challenge track. A series of 40 challenges which reward you with cosmetic items as you finish more and more of them. Obviously the most difficult ones are at the end, so let's see. Most of these will be inevitably completed as you play the game, and others are going to be extremely difficult for me specifically. As I mentioned previously, I haven't defeated some pinnacle bosses, not to mention their hard modes. And one of the challenges, for instance, peak pinnacle prowess, is defeating, my god, why is this word so hard for me to say? Defeating the pinnacle bosses in their hard modes. There's definitely metagaming in PoE. Some builds will be absolutely dominating over others, and also some builds will perform better at other things like mapping, and other will perform better with bosses. As a filthy casual, I would not have any idea about that, so I just turned on the game, create my character, and see what happens. So I would like to finish at least 38 of these challenges in order to unlock the full cosmetic set. Some of you more experienced players might scoff and say, the challenges are a piece of cake. But please put yourself in the shoes of the casual player who craves an action RPG with a complex passive skill tree system. This is the path of casual after all. Anyway, moving on. We're currently about 3 weeks into the Crucible League, and before I had this idea to create a series, I tried making a ranger, and I'm currently level 84. You might be familiar with a game called Archero. Well, since I sometimes play it when I travel, I thought I would try recreating something similar to that game in Path of Exile. Didn't work out the way I expected it to, so let's try something different and treat this character as a bit of a head start, because all the currency I obtained on that character will also be available to this new character as well. There are multiple modes to play the game. Standard, which is basically your main account, all characters which die in hardcore modes, as well as characters created during a season or a league, end up here when one league ends and another begins. You will notice that there's an additional button called Solo Self-Found at the bottom, which disables trading and either adding other players to your party, which is a key feature I want to put emphasis on. I want to finish these challenges on my own, without any external help apart from your feedback in the comments below. Because let's be real, when you have challenges which you can finish in a party, you will inevitably get cheating involved and real money involved. And I don't want to be accused later on that I got a piece of gear from someone or killed a boss with someone else's help. It would defeat the whole point I'm trying to make about this being a path of casual. Now that I think about it, you might think that this is the actual way a casual player would complete this challenge. All the more reason to make it a solo challenge. Also, if PoE is pay to win, it absolutely is if you consider winning completing challenges. In addition, I'm sure some people are selling rare currencies for real money. I wouldn't know anything about that. I never bought any. I think paying real money for progress deletes the fun from video games, but that's just my opinion. What do I know? I'm just a filthy casual. Alrighty, let's try picking a class. We have 7 classes to choose from: Templar, Shadow, Marauder, Scion, Ranger, Duelist, and Witch. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, if you're playing for the first time without any planning beforehand. What you have to realize though in Path of Exile you have 3 main stats, that's strength, intelligence and dexterity. It isn't really explained by the game in the character creation, but you will see in a bit that 3 of these classes represent pure stats, Marauder for strength, Witch for intelligence, and Ranger for dexterity. And you have also these hybrid classes that mix 2 out of these 3 basic stats. Duelist for strength and dexterity, Shadow for dexterity and intelligence, as well as Templar for strength and intelligence. The 7th class Scion is the most flexible of all these classes, and it isn't really tied to any single stat. These classes also begin their passive skill trees in different places, which you will see in a moment. Where I usually gave up in the end game is when I hit a difficulty spike, which causes my character to just go poof in a single hit all the time, and I cannot handle trying to improve my gear, and I find myself at a loss. Do I create a new character with a different guide, or do I grind through lower tier maps in order to slowly but more surely find upgrades and level up? As I mentioned, I'm pretty stubborn and probably stupid, so I try to push as high tier maps as possible as soon as possible. Considering that I like looking at designs from a designer's perspective, I'm unsure how long the end game should take. I know for a fact that people can reach max level, which is 100, in a few days, but that's because they have so much experience playing this game and they have done so much research that their efficiency is probably near 100%. In comparison, my efficiency playing PoE is probably around, let's say, 1 to 3% because I'm a filthy casual. That means that I should reach the same level 100 as the experienced player in roughly 50 days of playing the game non-stop, which is probably like a little bit more than 700 hours I have logged on Steam. Yay! The goal of this series, apart from being a helpful tool for new players, is also to improve my own efficiency and skill. If I succeed, I hope I can reach at least 5%. I came up with this idea when I thought that maybe recording and rewatching my own gameplay will help me improve. I know that I could watch someone else play, but it doesn't tell me, like, where was I, for instance, looking at the screen wrong? What did I miss? You know, only time can tell. So anyway, picking a class. A new player will not know this, so I'll try to explain as quickly as possible. I mentioned an endgame and pinnacle bosses. The way PoE works is that after you finish the story, you unlock something called the Atlas of Worlds, with a huge amount of mini dungeons called maps. In those maps you encounter hordes of normal monsters with magic packs sprinkled in, but the actual enemies you have to look out for are the rare monsters and uniques at the end of the map. These ones can basically delete your character in one hit if you're not prepared properly. So basically you're focusing your damage on the rare monsters and everything else dies around by collateral damage. As a little side note, personally, I see a lot of similarities between action RPGs and card games. For example, in Hearthstone you can have an aggressive deck with lots of small minions which deal small amounts of damage, but this damage piles up and allows you to defeat your opponent very quickly. Now the downside of a deck like that might be that it cannot deal with very large enemies. It doesn't have removal. For example, a big taunt minion in the way. Sure, you can include a card that offsets that weakness, but it might make your overall deck weaker. Similarly, in Path of Exile, your build, by which I mean the way you allocate your passive skill points, can be very focused on offense, but you will have to trade your defense for it, because you will have a limited amount of points to allocate. The first 100 passive points are basically a breeze, because you earn those through playing the campaign, but the other 23, which you might have considered in your build in some crucial way, are only going to be available to you after you get into the late end game, so reach level 100. The other way around might also be a problem, where your build will be pretty much indestructible, but you will deal no damage. You can either offset this weakness with gear, or try to make an all-rounder build, which again, compared to a card game, will be something akin to a mid-range or a value deck. In my opinion, the way to go is to make a passive skill tree which will supply you with both defense as well as offense, and then improve those qualities with your gear. With the newest Crucible League, you can attach little passive skill trees to your weapons. Seeing as you can attach a skill tree to both an offhand and a main hand, I would like to try something which uses 2 weapons or 1 hand and a shield, with heavy focus on defense, because again, I keep dying. And no, it's not going to be Box's Righteous Fire build, probably. Maybe. I honestly never played a Scion though, so maybe I'll try a Scion for the first time. See, this is the first hurdle for new players, because the most build-defining feature in Path of Exile are ascendancies, and you cannot look them up from the character creation screen. So we'll have a quick look at Google here to see what ascendancies there are and what we'll be building our character around. Alright, so looks like either Champion, Juggernaut, or Guardian will be my pick because they look like they're wearing some heavy armor. Maybe I'll try a 1-hand plus shield for bosses and a 2-handed weapon for clearing, or the other way around. In PoE, in case you didn't know, you can equip 2 sets of weapons and switch between them at any time, even in the middle of battle. This is an advantage because a 2-handed weapon can have 6 linked slots for your gems, which is a major advantage compared to the maximum of 3 slots in a 1-handed weapon. Okay, I will think I will end this first part here. I more or less have an idea of what I want to pursue, but I will talk more about it in the future videos. If you would like to accompany me on this journey, please consider subscribing, as I will upload my progress hopefully sometime soon. Or if you would like to chill with me, I will probably only be playing this character on stream over at twitch.tv/talkavet. So follow me there and expect to see me around noon or 1 p.m. EST at any given day. See you soon.